There is a kind of presence that grows stronger with age instead of fading, and almost no one is taught how to build it. You have watched it happen the other way around. You have seen people grow quieter in the wrong way, smaller, easier to overlook, folded into the corner of rooms they once stood in the center of. And you may have felt the pull of it yourself. That slow suggestion that your time to be noticed has passed, that the world has turned its attention elsewhere, that the most useful thing you can now do is take up less space. That suggestion is a lie, and it is one of the most expensive lies a person can believe, because there are people who age into something the room cannot ignore, not louder, not more demanding, not dressed to be seen or straining to be relevant. They walk in and something shifts, and no one can quite say why. The truth is simple, and it has nothing to do with beauty or wealth or the volume of a voice. It has to do with how a person carries what they have lived through, and whether they have kept their self-worth or handed it away one small surrender at a time. Here is what most people never understand. Being ignored is rarely about being old. It is about self-regard, and the world reading it off you like a label. People calibrate their treatment of you to the amount of respect they see you hold for yourself. When that respect thins, they feel it before you say a word, and they adjust. When it is intact, they feel that too, and they adjust in the opposite direction. Age has nothing to do with it. A person can be 30 and invisible. A person can be 75 and impossible to walk past. Look closely at that last idea, because it overturns the entire story you have been told about growing older. The story says that visibility is a resource that drains with the years, that you begin life full of it and slowly leak it away until there is none left. But visibility was never the point, and it was never really about being looked at. The people who cannot be ignored are not being watched for their appearance. They are being felt for their substance. And substance does not leak with age. It compounds. There are 3 signs that a person has begun to build a presence that cannot be dismissed, and there are 3 things to do to build it if you have not yet. That is what this is. Not a lecture on staying young. A description of what quiet strength actually looks like, and how it is earned in the second half of a life rather than the first. You already know some of this. You have simply never heard it put plainly enough to act on. Start with why this is real, because if you do not believe it is real, none of the rest will hold. People do not treat you according to your value. They treat you according to the value they perceive. Those 2 things are not the same, and the gap between them is where most of the pain of being overlooked lives. You can be generous, wise, and deeply worth knowing, and still be treated as furniture, because the signal you send does not match the substance you carry. This is not fair. It is simply how it works, and understanding it is the beginning of changing it. Sit with that gap for a moment, because it explains almost everything you have ever found bewildering about the way people have treated you. You have watched someone with half your depth and a fraction of your kindness walk into a room and command it, while you, with more to offer, were passed over. It did not make sense, and it stung, and you may have decided it was about charm, or looks, or luck. It was none of those. It was signal. The other person was broadcasting self-regard, and you were broadcasting apology, and the room simply read the broadcasts and responded to what it heard. The signal is not what you say about yourself. Almost no one is moved by what a person announces. Dignity that has to describe itself is not dignity yet. The signal is in the smaller things. It is in your carriage, in how you enter a room and how you leave one. It is in what you tolerate and what you decline to tolerate. It is in whether you flinch when someone tests you or whether you meet the test with stillness. People read these things faster than they read words, and they decide how to handle you before the conversation has properly begun. Understand how ancient this reading is. Long before anyone speaks, a person is assessed. The eyes move first to how someone stands, how they occupy the space, whether they seem to be asking permission to be there or simply are there. This assessment happens beneath thought, in a place older than manners, and it does not care what you have accomplished or how much you have suffered. It reads only the posture of your self-regard, and it decides in an instant. This is why the resume of your life is invisible in a first encounter, and why the whole weight of who you are can be misjudged in the length of a breath. The signal arrived before you did. Consider what happens in the first 30 seconds of disrespect. Someone speaks to you in a way that is dismissive, or cuts across you, or treats your presence as an inconvenience. In those first 30 seconds, everything is decided, not by them, by you. If you shrink, if you apologize for taking up air, if you laugh it off to smooth the moment, you have taught them what they are allowed to do. If you remain composed, unhurried, and simply do not reward the disrespect with the discomfort it was fishing for, you have taught them something else entirely. And people are excellent students of what you permit. They learn the lesson the first time. Watch how quickly the lesson takes. A single laugh at your own expense, offered to ease the tension when someone belittles you, and the belittling now has a green light. It will come back, because you rewarded it. A single moment of holding steady, of letting the barbed comment land in silence and go nowhere. And the person who threw it recalibrates. They do not consciously decide anything. They simply feel that the ground beneath their disrespect gave way, and they do not step there again. This is happening constantly, under every interaction, whether you attend to it or not. This is why some people are ignored no matter how much they give, and others are respected no matter how little they say. It is not about the giving. Endless giving with no boundaries reads as low self-worth, and the world punishes low self-worth without mercy. It is about the standards a person holds and the peace they refuse to trade away. A person who protects their peace is read as someone with something worth protecting. A person who abandons their peace to keep others comfortable is read as someone with nothing valuable inside to guard. Notice the difference between being liked and being valued, because most people spend their whole lives chasing the wrong one. Being liked is easy. You can buy it with agreement, with flattery, with making yourself endlessly available and endlessly small. But being liked in that way is not safety. The people who like you because you never say no will forget you the moment you finally do. Being valued is different. Value is what remains when you stop performing. It is respect that does not depend on your usefulness in the moment. You earn it not by pleasing, but by having a center that does not move, a self that other people cannot rearrange with a frown or a raised voice. The difference reveals itself most clearly at the exact moment you stop giving. The person who only liked you falls away, sometimes with resentment, sometimes without a word, and their departure is the truth arriving late. The person who valued you stays, and often stays closer, because your refusal to keep performing showed them there was a real person underneath the accommodation, and a real person is worth far more than a convenient one. This is the test that sorts your whole life if you let it run. Stop performing and watch who remains. What remains is what was ever real. There is a particular grief in this test, and it is worth naming, because it stops people from ever running it. When you finally stop performing, some of the people who fall away will be people you spent years loving, people you fed, defended, rescued, forgave. It will feel like loss, and in a small way it is loss, but it is the loss of a debt, not of a treasure. You were paying to keep them, and the payment was yourself. When you stop paying and they leave, what you have lost is the cost, not the thing. The thing was never there. You only imagined it was, because you had never once tested whether they would stay when there was nothing left to gain. And here is the part that unsettles people. You do not build this by becoming harder. You build it by becoming clearer. Clear about what you are and are not available for. Clear about how much of yourself you will spend on people who have shown you contempt. Clear about the difference between kindness, which you can offer freely, and access, which you grant only to those who have earned it. Hardness is armor for someone who is afraid. Clarity is the posture of someone who is not. That distinction between kindness and access is worth holding on to, because it dissolves the false choice that traps so many people. You have been told that the alternative to being a doormat is being cold, that if you stop giving endlessly, you will become bitter and closed. This is not true, and it is a lie that keeps good people trapped in their own overgiving. You can remain warm. You can remain generous. You simply learn that warmth is not the same as unlimited access to your time, your energy, and your peace. You can be kind to someone and still not let them into the inner rooms of your life. Kindness is what you offer the world. Access is what you offer the few who have proven safe. Age, handled this way, is not a decline. It is a refining. Every betrayal you survived taught you something about who to trust. Every season of solitude returned a piece of yourself that being needed had worn thin. Every time you explained yourself to someone determined to misread you and finally stopped, you recovered energy you did not know you were bleeding. This is the accumulation of discernment, and it is the one thing the young cannot fake and cannot rush. It is the reason a person can grow more magnetic at 70 than they ever were at 25. But there is something almost nobody sees here. The presence that cannot be ignored is not built by adding anything. It is built by subtracting, by removing the flinch, by removing the need to be understood by everyone, by removing the reflex to fill silence, to over-explain, to chase approval down the hall. What remains after all that subtraction is presence, stillness that other people can feel, a composure that does not have to be defended because it is not for sale. This is why the young, for all their energy, so rarely have it. They are still adding, still gathering opinions to agree with, still collecting people to please, still performing a self they hope will be accepted. Presence comes later, if it comes at all, and only to those who have started letting go. You are closer to it now than you have ever been, not despite your years, but because of them. Because you have finally lived long enough to have things worth subtracting. That is the foundation. Now the signs. The first sign of a person who has aged into someone others cannot ignore is that they have stopped explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. This looks small from the outside. It is anything but. For most of a life, you are trained to believe that if someone thinks poorly of you, the answer is more words, more context, more justification. You lay out your reasons, your good intentions, the full account of why you did what you did, hoping that once they truly understand, the misjudgment will lift. And with fair-minded people, it sometimes does. But there is a certain kind of person who is not confused about you. They have decided about you, and they are not looking for information. They are looking for the satisfaction of watching you scramble to fix their opinion. Understand why this happens. When someone has committed to misreading you, your explanations are not received as clarity. They are received as evidence that they have power over you, that their disapproval can send you running, that you will exhaust yourself for their approval. Every additional word confirms the thing you are trying to disprove, which is that their judgment matters more than your own peace. The more you explain, the smaller you become in their eyes, and the more entertaining your effort. You are performing for an audience that bought a ticket to watch you fall. Learn to tell the two kinds of listener apart, because your whole response depends on it. The fair-minded listener asks a question and then goes quiet to hear the answer. Their face softens as understanding arrives. They may have judged you wrongly, but they hold their judgment loosely, ready to set it down when the truth comes. The other kind asks a question that is not a question at all. It is a trap dressed as curiosity. No answer satisfies it, because it was never seeking an answer. Watch what happens after you speak. If your words are met with a new accusation rather than a softening, you are not in a conversation. You are in a performance, and you are the entertainment. There is a quieter tell as well, one that reveals the manager before they have said a word twice. The fair-minded listener remembers what you told them. When you explain something once, it stays explained, and they carry it forward. The one committed to misreading you forgets on purpose. The thing you clarified last month is raised again this month as though it were never addressed, because the point was never to arrive at understanding. The point was the raising of it, again and again. The small pleasure of watching you defend the same ground you already defended. When you notice that no explanation ever sticks, you have your answer. You are not being misunderstood. You are being managed, and the misunderstanding is the tool. There was a person who spent years defending herself to a family member who twisted everything she said, every holiday, the same. She would arrive with a careful speech prepared, ready to finally set the record straight, and she would leave hollowed out, having spent the whole day laying her heart on a table where it was picked apart for sport. One year she simply stopped. She said nothing in her own defense. When the accusations came, she let them sit in the air, unanswered, and she kept her face calm and her voice easy, and spoke only about other things. The room did not know what to do. The person who had built their whole approach on her scrambling found nothing to push against, and the performance collapsed for lack of a partner. She was treated differently from that day forward, not because she won an argument, because she declined to have one. Notice what she did not do, because the not doing is the whole lesson. She did not fire back. She did not make a scene about being mistreated. She did not deliver a speech about how tired she was of the twisting. Any of those would have been another kind of scrambling, another way of handing over her peace. She simply removed herself from the game while remaining in the room, present and calm, and entirely unavailable for the role she had always played. The person testing her needed a reaction the way a fire needs air, and she gave none, and the fire found nothing to burn. Notice, too, what it cost her in that first year, because the cost is the reason so few people ever try it. The silence did not feel powerful from the inside. It felt like swallowing. Every accusation left unanswered sat in her chest like a stone, and the whole of her wanted to reach for the old defense, to set the record straight one more time, to be understood at last. She held anyway. She learned that the wanting to be understood does not go away, that it is not supposed to go away, that the discipline is not in killing the want but in declining to obey it. By the second year, the stones were lighter. By the third, they were barely there. The composure that looked so effortless from the outside was built quietly out of 100 swallowed defenses that taught her she could survive being misjudged. So here is what to do. When you feel the pull to explain yourself to someone who has shown you they are not listening, stop before the first word. Ask yourself one thing. Is this person trying to understand me or trying to manage me? If they are trying to understand, offer them the truth once, cleanly, and let it stand. If they are trying to manage you, give them silence. Not cold silence, not a slammed door. The easy silence of someone who has nothing to prove and nowhere to run. Let them fill the space with their own noise. You will find that silence does what argument never could. It removes the reward. And a person who is not being rewarded eventually loses the appetite. Practice the phrase that ends the game without escalating it. When pressed to defend yourself yet again, you can say, simply, that you understand they see it differently, and leave it there. No further defense, no new evidence, just the calm acknowledgement that their view is theirs, offered without any attempt to change it. This drives the manager to distraction because it gives them nothing to grip. You have neither surrendered nor fought. You have stepped off the field entirely, and there is no way to win a game against someone who has quietly declined to play. Keep a second phrase ready for when they press harder, because they will press harder. When the silence in the first phrase fail to produce the reaction they came for, they often escalate, sharpening the accusation to force you back into the game. To this you offer nothing new, only the same calm ground. You have said what you have to say. That is all. Then you let the quiet return. What you are teaching in these repetitions is that the door you used to open on demand no longer opens, not slammed, not locked in anger, simply not opening, because there is no longer anyone inside willing to run out and defend the house to a person who only came to watch it burn. This is not weakness, and it is not surrender. Restraint is one of the strongest things a person can practice, because it takes the whole of your self-respect to hold your tongue when everything in you wants to be understood. The wanting to be understood is human, the choosing not to chase it, with people who have made themselves your judge, is the beginning of a presence no one can push around. The second sign is that they no longer negotiate their standards to keep someone in the room. Watch how most people behave when they sense a relationship slipping. They soften their standards. They tell themselves the thing that bothered them was not so bad. They accept the third late arrival, the repeated dismissal, the small cruelty dressed up as a joke, because the alternative is being alone with their standards intact, and that feels colder than the mistreatment. So they trade their dignity for company, and they do it a little at a time, so slowly they never notice the moment they became someone who accepts less than they know they deserve. The reason this happens is fear of solitude, and it is worth looking at that fear directly, because it runs almost everything. People will endure astonishing amounts of disrespect to avoid being alone. They mistake the presence of another body for the presence of care. But a person who will only stay if you lower yourself was never really with you. They were with the version of you that stopped requiring anything, and that version is not you. It is a performance you put on to keep a chair from emptying, and the longer you perform it, the further you drift from the person you actually are. Look at how the trading happens, because it is never one large decision. It is 1,000 tiny ones, each small enough to seem reasonable in the moment. You let the interruption pass because it was only once. You accept the broken promise because they were tired. You laugh at the joke that had a blade in it because making a fuss felt worse than the small wound. And each of these alone is nothing, but they accumulate. They compound in the wrong direction. And one morning you look at the shape of a relationship and realize you have been slowly teaching someone that you can be treated any way at all, because you never once drew the line that would have taught them otherwise. See the deeper trap in it, which is that each small surrender makes the next one easier. The first time you let the cruelty pass, it costs you something to stay quiet. The 10th time, it costs you nothing, because you have already sold that piece of ground and forgotten you owned it. This is how a proud person becomes an accommodating one, without ever deciding to. There was no single moment of surrender to point at. No day they can name when they gave themselves away. It happened in increments too small to register, the way water shapes stone, and by the end the shape is set and they cannot remember it any other way. The mercy is that the same mechanism runs in reverse. One small line held makes the next one easier, until holding the line is simply who you are. The one who has aged into real presence has made peace with solitude, and this changes everything about how they are treated. When you are genuinely willing to be alone rather than disrespected, you stop negotiating. You do not threaten. You do not deliver ultimatums. You do not make speeches about your worth. You simply hold your standards quietly, and you let people meet them or not. The willingness to walk away, held calmly and without drama, is the single most powerful thing a person can carry into any room, not the threat of leaving. The genuine, settled willingness. People feel it, and it reorganizes how they behave toward you, because they can no longer assume you will absorb whatever they hand you. There is a difference between the threat and the willingness that is worth making very clear, because people confuse them constantly. The threat is loud. It announces itself. It says, if you do that again, I will leave. And in the announcing, it reveals that leaving is still only a bargaining chip, something to be waived and then withdrawn. The willingness is quiet. It says nothing at all. It simply exists, a settled fact inside you that you would genuinely rather be alone than be diminished. And because you are not using it as leverage, it becomes real. And because it is real, people feel it in a way no threat could ever make them feel it. Understand why the threat always fails. A threat is a request in disguise. It says, please value me enough that I do not have to follow through, and everyone hears the plea underneath the words. It reveals that you do not actually want to leave, that you want to be given a reason to stay. And this hands the other person all the power, because now they know that leaving is the last thing you want. The willingness reveals the opposite. It does not ask for anything. It is not trying to change them. It has already accepted every outcome, including the one where they do not rise to meet you. And a person who has accepted every outcome cannot be controlled by any of them. This is why the quiet one is the strong one. They have nothing left to be afraid of. Consider a man who spent decades keeping the peace by never asking for anything. He was easy, agreeable, always the one to bend. And people used him exactly the way you would expect. Then he entered a long stretch of solitude, not by choice at first, and something happened inside it. He discovered that his own company was not the punishment he had feared. It was calm. It was clean. It returned to him a self he had loaned out for so long he had forgotten owning it. When he came back into people's lives, he was different. He asked for what he needed. He said no without a paragraph of apology attached. And the strange thing was that people did not leave. They respected him. The ones who had only wanted the doormat drifted off, and their leaving cost him nothing, because he no longer needed the doormat to have company. Watch what happened to his voice in that change, because it is the part that carries the lesson. Before the solitude, he spoke quickly, always slightly ahead of himself, filling gaps, softening every request with a laugh, ending his sentences on a rising note as if asking permission for them to have been said. After, he slowed. His sentences ended where they ended, flat and finished, requiring no approval. He stopped explaining his no. He would say it and then simply wait, comfortable in the pause. And the pause did more than any explanation ever had. People who had spoken over him for years began, without knowing why, to let him finish. Nothing about his rights had changed, only his carriage, and his carriage told the truth his words had spent decades apologizing for. What you do with this is straightforward, though not easy. Pick one standard you have quietly abandoned to keep the peace. Just one. Maybe it is being spoken to a certain way. Maybe it is being the one who always reaches out. Maybe it is being available at all hours to someone who is never available to you. Restore that one standard, without announcement. Do not explain that you are doing it. Do not warn anyone. Simply begin holding the line, calmly, and see who adjusts and who complains. The ones who adjust value you. The ones who complain valued your compliance, and their complaint is information you needed. Expect the pushback, and expect it to feel worse than you imagined. When you restore a standard after years of not holding it, the people who benefited from its absence will not applaud. They will test the line, again and again, to see if it is real or just a mood that will pass. This testing is the hardest part, because it will tempt you to conclude that holding the standard is causing conflict, and that returning to your old accommodation would restore the peace. It would not. It would only restore the illusion of peace, purchased with your dignity. Hold through the testing. On the other side of it, the relationships rearrange into something honest, and honest is always better than comfortable. Know the shapes the testing takes, so they do not catch you off guard. First comes the surprise, the raised eyebrow, the who do you think you are that is often unspoken but always felt. Then comes the appeal to history, the reminder of how you used to be, the suggestion that you have changed and not for the better. Then, if that fails, comes the accusation of coldness, the charge that you have become selfish or hard or unlike yourself. Each of these is a lever, and each is pulled to move you back to where you were useful. Recognize them as levers, and they lose their grip. You have not become cold. You have become clear. You have not changed for the worse. You have stopped disappearing. The accusation of hardness is simply the last thing an old arrangement says as it dies. Detachment is the word for this, and it is not coldness. It is the ability to care about someone without handing them the power to determine your peace. You can love a person and still refuse to negotiate your dignity for their comfort. In fact, that refusal is a deeper form of respect, both for them and for yourself, because it insists that the relationship be built on something real rather than on your endless accommodation. The third thing people miss is that a person of real presence has learned to let silence and stillness do the work that scrambling used to do. Most of the anxiety in ordinary interaction is the anxiety of the gap, the pause after someone says something cutting, the silence when a question hangs unanswered, the empty air that most people rush to fill because they cannot bear it, and in that rushing they give themselves away. They overtalk, they laugh nervously, they concede points they did not need to concede, they fill the quiet with anything at all just to end the discomfort. The rush to fill silence is one of the clearest signs of low self-regard, and everyone reads it, even people who could not name what they are reading. The person who has aged into presence has made a different relationship with silence. They do not fear the gap. They live comfortably inside it. When something cutting is said, they let it land and sit there, unanswered, and they hold their composure while the other person waits to see them react. The reaction never comes, and this is far more unsettling to the person testing you than any sharp reply could ever be. Silence, held with a calm face, communicates that you are not afraid, that you are not in a hurry, that their words did not reach the place they were aimed at. It communicates a self that does not need to defend itself because it is not in danger. Understand what silence does to the person who was trying to provoke you. They said the cutting thing, expecting a particular response, a flinch, a defense, a flash of hurt, some proof that the barb reached its mark. That expected response is the reward, and it is the whole reason the barb was thrown. When the response does not come, when the silence simply holds and your face stays easy, they are left holding the cruelty alone, with nowhere for it to go. It reflects back on them. In the quiet, everyone in the room hears the smallness of what was said, precisely because you did not cover it with noise. Your silence did not hide the disrespect. It exposed it. Stillness works the same way. There is a physical composure that comes to a person who has stopped rehearsing their next line while another person is still speaking. They are simply present. They listen fully. They do not fidget toward their reply. They do not perform interest or perform patience. This kind of stillness is rare, and it is magnetic, because most people have never in their lives been in the presence of someone who was completely, unhurriedly there. It makes others feel seen, and it makes you unforgettable, and it costs nothing but the discipline to stop performing. There was a woman known in her circle for saying very little, and for the strange authority that gathered around her because of it. She did not dominate conversations. She did not fight for airtime. When people argued around her, she let them argue and did not join. And yet when she finally spoke, everyone stopped to listen, because her words had not been diluted by 100 needless ones before them. Her silence had given her few words weight. People assumed she was wise, and perhaps she was, but the mechanism was simpler than wisdom. She had learned that speech spent carelessly is speech that means nothing, and that a person who is comfortable in silence is a person no one can quite manage. Watch how others behaved around her, because it reveals the effect precisely. People confided in her, though she asked for nothing. People sought her approval, though she withheld it as often as she gave it. When a dispute needed settling, they turned to her before she had said a word, simply because her stillness read as judgment held in reserve, and everyone wanted that judgment on their side. She had accumulated authority not by claiming it, but by declining to spend herself. Every conversation she did not need to win. Every provocation she let pass. Every silence she kept when others would have rushed to speak, added quietly to a weight that could be felt but never quite located. That weight was presence, and it was made entirely of restraint. This is the economy of words, and almost no one understands it. Words are like anything else. When they are abundant, they lose value. The person who fills every silence, who explains every thought, who narrates their own life to anyone within earshot, has trained everyone around them to stop listening closely because there is always more coming and none of it needs to be caught. The person who speaks rarely has done the opposite. Every word they release is scarce, and scarcity is weight. When such a person speaks, the room leans in, not because the words are wiser, but because the silence around them said the words were worth waiting for. To build this, Start with one practice. The next time someone says something designed to provoke you, do nothing for 3 full seconds. Do not answer. Do not adjust your face. Just breathe and hold and let the silence exist. Those 3 seconds will feel enormous because you are so trained to fill them. But on the other side of them, you will find something you did not expect. You will find that you are in control of the moment, not because you conquered it, but because you refuse to be pulled into it. Composure is not the absence of feeling. It is the decision not to hand your feeling to the person who was fishing for it. Build a second practice on top of the first, which is the discipline of not answering questions that were never sincere. When someone asks you something designed to corner you, notice that you are not required to answer. A question is not a command. You can meet it with another question, or with a simple observation that it is an interesting thing to ask, or with nothing at all, a mild look and a turn of the conversation. People assume every question spoken to them creates an obligation to respond, and this assumption is the leash by which they are led. Set it down. You choose what you dignify with an answer. The refusal to be interrogated, offered calmly and without offense, is one of the quiet arts of composure, and it teaches people that access to your inner world is not automatic. And notice what silence protects. It protects your energy, which is finite and precious, and spent far too freely on people who do not deserve it. Every unnecessary word in a hostile conversation is energy leaving your body to feed someone who is not on your side. Silence keeps it in. Stillness keeps it in. This is not withdrawal from life. It is the careful keeping of your own strength, so that when you do spend it, you spend it on what matters. Now, what to actually do? Because recognition without action changes nothing. Begin with your carriage, because it is the first thing anyone reads and the fastest thing to change. How you hold your body when you enter a space tells everyone how to treat you before you have spoken. This is not about standing rigid or performing confidence you do not feel. It is about refusing to make yourself small. So many people, as they age, begin to apologize with their whole body. They shrink their shoulders, they lower their eyes, they move as if trying not to be a bother. And the world reads this instantly and treats them accordingly, because a body that apologizes for existing is a body that has told everyone its self-worth is low. The correction is simple and it is physical. Slow down your movements. Rushing signals anxiety and eagerness to please. A person of presence is never in a hurry, because hurry says your time is worth less than everyone else's. Take the space you are entitled to. Sit fully in the chair. Speak at a pace that does not race to finish before someone interrupts. Let there be pauses in your speech, because pauses signal that you are not afraid of being cut off, that you assume you will be allowed to finish. And meet people's eyes, not aggressively, but steadily, the way someone looks who has nothing to hide and nothing to prove. These are small things, and they change everything, because they change the signal, and the signal is what people respond to. Pay particular attention to what your hands and your voice do when you are uncertain, because these betray you faster than anything. Anxious hands touch the face. Straighten what is already straight. Reach for something to hold. Still hands rest. Let your hands rest, and the voice, when it is unsure, rises at the ends of sentences, turning statements into questions, asking permission for the thing just said. Train your sentences to fall at the end, to land, to finish where they finish, without the little upward lift that begs for approval. A sentence that lands tells the listener the matter is settled. A sentence that rises tells them you are waiting to see whether they will allow it. You will be astonished how much authority arrives simply from letting your words come to rest. Add one more thing to your carriage, and it is the hardest because it is a habit worn deep. Stop the reflexive apology. Listen to how often the word sorry leaves your mouth for things that require no apology at all. Sorry for asking a question. Sorry for taking a moment of someone's time. Sorry for existing in the space you have every right to occupy. Each of these small apologies is a coin of your dignity handed over for nothing. Notice them. Catch them before they leave. Replace them, where a response is needed at all, with a simple thank you. Not sorry for keeping you, but thank you for waiting. The difference is enormous, because one lowers you and the other keeps you level, and people feel the level in you and treat you as level in return. Next, work on what you tolerate, because your boundaries are the true measure of your self-respect, and everyone can see them. A boundary is not a wall, and it is not a punishment. It is simply the line past which you do not allow your peace to be spent. Most people have boundaries in theory and none in practice, because the moment someone pushes, they fold, terrified of the conflict that holding the line might bring. But the conflict you avoid by folding is not avoided. It is deferred, and it grows, and it turns inward, and it becomes the quiet resentment that poisons a person from the inside while they smile and accommodate. Practice the smallest boundaries first. When someone asks for your time and you do not want to give it, say you cannot without a story attached. The story is where you give yourself away. A person of presence does not explain their no into the ground, hoping the other person will approve of the reason. They simply say no, warmly, and let it be complete. When someone speaks to you with contempt, do not reward it with engagement. Do not argue. Do not defend. Do not chase. Withdraw your energy from the exchange, calmly, and let the contempt find no purchase. And when someone repeatedly disrespects you, stop returning to the place where it happens. You do not owe anyone your continued presence in a space where you are treated as less than you are. Walk away is not a threat you make. It is a thing you quietly do. There is a particular skill in the no without the story, and it is worth rehearsing until it becomes natural, because the instinct to explain runs so deep. When you decline and then immediately supply a reason, you have handed the other person something to argue with. They can dispute your reason, offer a solution to it, press on the soft place where you revealed why. But a no with no reason attached has no soft place. It cannot be argued with, because there is nothing there to grip. I cannot make it. I am not able to do that. That does not work for me. Complete sentences, all of them, requiring nothing further. Say them warmly, without a trace of apology, and then be quiet and let the no do its work in the silence that follows. Learn also the boundary that is not spoken at all, the one held entirely in what you do. Some people cannot be told a boundary because they treat the telling as an invitation to negotiate. With them, you do not announce. You simply stop being available in the way you used to be. The call you always took, you let go once. The favor you always granted, you decline once, without ceremony. The visit where you are always mistreated, you attend less, then less again. This is a boundary written in behavior rather than words, and it is often the only kind that certain people can read, because they were never listening to your words in the first place. They were only ever watching what you would allow. Change what you allow, and you have spoken in the only language they understand. Understand that holding boundaries will make some people angry, and this anger is not a sign you have done wrong. It is a sign you have done exactly right. The people who benefited from your lack of boundaries will protest the arrival of them, and their protest is the sound of a system correcting itself. Let them be angry. Their anger is not your responsibility to soothe. Your responsibility is to your own dignity, and dignity that dissolves the moment someone disapproves of it was never dignity at all. It was a performance of agreeableness that you mistook for character. Then, tend to your solitude, because everything you are building depends on being able to be alone without falling apart. The person who cannot bear their own company will always negotiate their standards to avoid it, and so their standards are never truly theirs. They are hostages to their fear of the empty room. But solitude, entered on purpose and made peace with, is where you recover the self that being needed wore down. It is where you hear your own thoughts again without the constant interruption of everyone else's needs. It is where discernment grows, because you finally have the quiet to notice who has been feeding you and who has been feeding on you. Spend deliberate time alone, not as punishment and not as retreat, but as maintenance. Sit with yourself without the television, without the phone, without the endless small distractions that keep you from your own company. It will feel uncomfortable at first, because you are not used to it, and the discomfort will tempt you to reach for someone, anyone, to fill the space. Do not reach. Stay. On the other side of that discomfort is a kind of peace that no relationship can give you, because it does not depend on anyone else's behavior. When you have that peace, you become unmanageable in the best sense. No one can control you with the threat of withdrawing their company, because you are no longer afraid of the quiet they threaten you with. Build it in small doses if the whole of it feels like too much at first. Begin with a quarter of an hour sitting somewhere plain, doing nothing, reaching for nothing. Let the restlessness come, because it will, and let it pass, because it does. The mind, deprived of its usual noise, will throw up every kind of discomfort to make you reach for the distraction again. Do not reach. Sit through the wave. What you are training is not the ability to be bored. It is the ability to be with yourself without flinching, and that ability is the quiet foundation of every boundary you will ever hold, because a person at peace in their own company simply cannot be blackmailed with loneliness. There is a change that comes over people who practice this, and it can be seen from the outside, though it was built entirely within. They stop scanning the room for reassurance. You have surely noticed people who cannot rest until they have read every face, measured every reaction, confirmed that they are still liked, still approved of, still safe. The one who has made peace with solitude no longer does this. They sit easy in their own presence, needing nothing from the faces around them, and this need for nothing is felt by everyone, and it changes everything. It is the difference between a person who has come to the gathering to be fed and a person who has come already full. The full one is never desperate, and the never desperate one is never easy to disrespect. And in that solitude, practice a specific kind of review. Look at the relationships in your life and sort them honestly. Which ones require you to shrink to remain in them? Which ones let you be your full size? Which ones drain you every time and leave you diminished? And which ones return you to yourself? This is discernment, and it cannot be done in the noise of constant company. It requires the stillness of being alone, where the truth about who is good for you and who is not finally has room to surface. Most people never do this review, and so they carry relationships for decades that quietly cost them everything, out of habit, out of guilt, out of fear of the solitude that ending them would bring. There is one more thing to build, and it is the hardest, because it is invisible and it takes the longest. It is the settled decision that your peace is not for sale, not to family, not to friends, not to the approval of anyone. This is the center everything else rotates around. When your peace is genuinely not for sale, you stop bending, not because you have become rigid, but because you have finally decided that the thing being asked for in exchange for the bending is worth more than the bending buys. Peace protected is a resource. Peace spent to keep others comfortable is a resource wasted. And once you truly understand that it is finite, you stop spending it so carelessly. Think of your peace the way you would think of anything precious you have only so much of. You would not hand it out to whoever asked most loudly. You would not spend it to quiet a room for a single evening, knowing it does not come back. And yet this is exactly how most people treat their peace, spending it on every small conflict, every request they did not want to grant, every person who leaned on their unwillingness to disappoint. The one who has learned resilience guards their peace the way a careful person guards their strength, spending it deliberately on what deserves it, and letting the rest of the world find its own comfort without draining theirs to provide it. Now consider what happens if none of this is done, because the cost of inaction is real, and it is worth looking at without flinching. There was a woman who spent her entire life being needed. She was the one everyone called. She held the family together, remembered the birthdays, made the calls, smoothed the conflicts, gave and never once asked for anything in return, because asking felt like weakness, and she had built her whole identity on being the strong one who needed nothing. And for decades this worked, in the sense that she was always surrounded, always busy, always in the middle of everyone else's life. She mistook this for being valued. She was being used gently by people who loved her in the way you love a resource you assume will always be there. The years passed, and her usefulness slowly declined, as it does for everyone. The children grew and needed her less. The friends she had propped up found other props, and she discovered, in the quiet that arrived, that she had built no self that could stand without the needing. She had spent so long being what others required that she no longer knew what she was when no one required anything. The solitude she had avoided her whole life arrived anyway, as it always does, and it found her without the resources to meet it, because she had never once practiced being alone with dignity, had never built the inner center that makes solitude bearable, had never learned that a person's worth does not depend on their usefulness to others. Here is the part that should stay with you. She was not treated poorly by cruel people. She was treated exactly as she had trained everyone to treat her. She had shown them over decades that her needs did not matter, that she would always give without requiring, that her peace could be spent freely because she offered it freely. And they believed her, because why would they not? People take you at the value you assign yourself. And she had assigned herself the value of a servant. And so a servant is what she was to them, right up until the moment there was nothing left to serve. Sit with the cruelty of that arithmetic, because it is the whole warning. The more she gave, the less she was valued. And this was not a betrayal by the people around her. It was the natural result of a law she never understood. Endless availability does not read as love. It reads as low worth, and low worth invites low treatment. Had she given half as much and required twice as much, she would have been treated better, not worse, because the requiring would have signaled a self that believed itself worth requiring for. She spent her life trying to earn regard by giving, and giving was the one thing that guaranteed she would never receive it. The tragedy was not a failure of love. It was a misunderstanding of how regard is earned, held for 70 years and never correct. Consider how easily it could have gone another way, because it could have at almost any point. There was no single catastrophe she needed to avoid. She only needed somewhere along the line to hold one line, to let one call go unmade and see who called her, to decline one request and survive the discomfort of it, to sit alone one evening on purpose and discover that the quiet was survivable. Any one of these, practiced early and repeated, would have begun to reshape how the world treated her, because it would have begun to reshape how she treated herself. The tragedy was not that she was unlovable. The tragedy was that she never let anyone learn to treat her as though she were worth more, because she never treated herself that way first. She was not ignored because she was old. She was ignored because she had spent a lifetime teaching the world that she required no regard, and the world is an obedient student of that lesson. This is the cost of never building the presence we have been describing. Not dramatic mistreatment, something quieter and sadder. A slow fade into invisibility that a person authors themselves, one small surrender at a time, until they wake one day in a silence they did not choose and cannot understand. But it does not have to go this way, and this is the whole point. The woman who has kept her self-worth intact does not fade. She refines. She becomes more of herself, not less. Her solitude, when it comes, is a homecoming rather than an exile, because she has been building a self-worth coming home to all along. Her boundaries have taught people to treat her with care. Her silence has given her words weight. Her composure has made her a presence in every room she enters, and age has not diminished this but concentrated it, the way time concentrates anything of quality. She is not ignored because she never taught anyone that she could be. This is available to you, and the only requirement is that you begin. So begin today, before the day is over, with something small and real. Choose one relationship where you have been spending your peace too freely, and this evening, do not chase it. If there is a message you always send first, a call you always make, an accommodation you always offer, let it go unmade for one day. Do not announce it, and do not explain it. Simply notice what it feels like to keep that energy inside your own body, and notice over the coming days who reaches toward you and who does not. Let that information teach you. Then, the next time someone says something meant to provoke you, hold 3 seconds of silence before you respond, if you respond at all. Let the gap exist. Keep your face calm. Feel the discomfort of not feeling it, and stay inside that discomfort until it passes, and it will pass. And on the other side of it, you will find you are steadier than you knew. And tonight, sit alone for a short while with no distraction, and do the honest review. Name one standard you have quietly abandoned to keep someone in the room, and decide tonight to restore it. Not with a speech, not with a confrontation, just with the quiet, settled decision that from now on this line holds. You do not have to tell anyone. Your carriage will tell them. Your stillness will tell them. The way you no longer flinch will tell them everything they need to know. Notice one more thing before the day ends, and let it be the smallest of all. Listen for the next apology that is about to leave your mouth for nothing, and catch it. Hold it. Say nothing where the sorry would have gone, or say thank you in its place, and feel how the ground stays level beneath you. That single caught apology is the whole practice in miniature, because it is you declining in one small breath to hand away a coin of your dignity that no one had even asked for. You are not too old for this. You are, in fact, exactly the right age, because you have lived the things that make it possible, and all that remains is to stop handing away what you have earned. The presence that cannot be ignored was never about being seen. It was about being whole. Begin there, and the rest will follow.